Greetings, friends, and welcome to the second edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Paul, and I'm glad to be here with my son, co-host, and partner in the paranormal, Benjamin.
Hey, how's it going?
Our theme today is reincarnation. Now, I've always been fascinated by that topic, and most people seem to believe in it one way or the other, even if their churches do not. And I've run into it in cases since the 1970s. People either ask about it, think it's happened to them or their children, or whatever. Now, Ben, looking back on that Torrington, Connecticut case in '05, the question of reincarnation came up then.
All right.
It did. We had an old farmhouse there. I think I might have mentioned this case in passing last week, and we went to visit it. And the farmhouse had been in the same family since 1783, and the thing was that everybody who had lived there since 1783 seemed to still be living there, remember?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's right. The owner of the house was wondering why, if reincarnation is true, there are so many old ghosts. And there's more about this case, of course, at our website, one of our websites, www.newenglandghosts.com. Now, the woman had first called us from that house because she'd read my book, Footsteps in the Attic, and thought that the multiverse theory we talked about last week was the only thing that could explain what was going on in her house. And I remember when Ben and I went there, you remember when they were talking about the, like people living and occupying the same space in this place without seeming to interact all that much with each other, but they could still see each other and hear each other at times. I remember the example that she gave of sitting in their living room and looking up and seeing legs hanging from the ceiling and walking as though they were on a normal surface somewhere else. And when she was asking about reincarnation, I think you might have been in another room with the video cam. But we did have some interesting experiences there. We refer to it as the psychic circus, but a number of worlds seem to be in interplay in that particular situation. But the idea of this multiverse thing is that nobody really dies. Their awareness just shifts to lives they're already living in parallel worlds. And in my experience, that explains ghosts, whether old or new, and reincarnation. But our distinguished guest today might have some other ideas. And Susan B. Martinez, Dr. Susan B. Martinez, is the author of the forthcoming book, The Reincarnation Myth. Born in New York City, Dr. Martinez is an independent scholar who earned her doctorate in anthropology at Columbia University, specializing in psycholinguistics, which, as I recall, is the study of how people learn, understand, and use language. Her fieldwork took her to the Guajiro Indians of South America. By the late 1970s, she, quote, became disillusioned with the urban intellectual agnostic lifestyle, unquote, and she set out on her spiritual quest, which led her to modern spiritualism, the religion of spiritualism, in 1981. After living and traveling in India and Afghanistan, Dr. Martinez settled back in the States and became the mother of two children, Alex and Lily. Now, since the 1990s, she has worked as a prison liaison mentor, a peace activist, and a freelance writer. Dr. Martinez is among a handful of international experts on the 19th century spiritualism. As a researcher and writer on the paranormal, she has lectured and written on ghost cold, multiple personality disorders, the afterlife, cosmogony, or that's how the universe was created, angelology, prehistory, and numerous aspects of psi, P-S-I, that's a Greek letter that's kind of a shorthand term for all things psychic. She has worked as an editor, teacher, and art dealer. Susan is a real Renaissance person, as you can see. She is also an award-winning jewelry designer, an award-winning poet, and literacy volunteer. Currently, she is the book review editor at the Academy of Spirituality and Paranormal Studies. Thank heaven there is such a thing. She is the author of The Psychic Life of Abraham Lincoln, which came to us from New Page Books last year. And she's working on two new books, The Reincarnation Hoax, the Reincarnation Myth, I believe it is, and Psi Crime. Needless to say, she has appeared on many talk shows, including Between the Lines on PBS, and she lives in the quiet mountains of North Georgia. Sounds good to me. Now, do we have Dr. Martinez with us? Oh, okay. I guess she's not with us yet. Well, we'll give her a few more minutes. In the meantime, we have a message here, and I do invite you to call in this evening. Last week we were kind of getting acquainted, and I will give you the call-in number tonight. It is toll-free in the U.S. and Canada, 888-235-2969. 888-235-7374. That's 888-235-7374. And we do have a quick message here from Patricia as we wait for our guest. Yes, I do believe in it. I guess it's reincarnation, but can you fill me in? Tell me, I should say, if there is someone with my son in jail or with me to help us in our lives and see that we need help. My son, something about rehab here. This isn't too clear. Well, the question is, I think, perhaps one about guardians, and we're going to deal with that in another show, but reincarnation does seem to be our topic tonight. But yes, I mean, I always believe as many bad, if you want to call them, entities that Ben and I have run into in our cases, and we do occasionally see them, there are more guardians than there are parasites. That's my term for these negative entities out there. This multiverse is a very, very big place, and there were many, many different kinds of worlds that are very different from each other. Some are not, and some are. And we're not the only creatures out there, and we're not the only intelligent creatures. And these worlds do interact. And I think that when we are open, when we get the junk out of our lives and get out of our own ways, we can be in contact with our guardians, and they can indeed help us. But we have to cooperate as well. And we also have the responsibility not to believe everything we hear that comes to us from other parts of the multiverse. And as I say, we'll get into this in other shows. But just to answer Patricia, yes, have hope. There is always hope. There are always good people trying to assist us here from other parts of the multiverse. Now, I believe Dr. Martinez has joined us.
That's right.
And we'd like to welcome her. Well, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, glad to be here.
Very good. Well, Ben and I are both here. And I'll just start with some questions, if you don't mind. I wondered if you could just, Ben has a question here for you to begin.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked over your new book, and I was kind of skeptical, about reincarnation, like what is reincarnation?
Yeah, just a quick definition, if you could.
Well, I'm not a reincarnationist, so I'll do my best. I will do my best to give it a quick definition, which is the idea that after we pass from this life, we spend a little time out there, and then we come back in new bodies, rebirth, re-embodiment.
Okay. Well, so you don't believe this? And I looked over your book too, and you're very skeptical about this, and you have other things to say about it. What exactly do you believe about reincarnation, or not believe about it?
Well, this is why I wrote the book, because there are just tons of books that come out on a regular basis promoting reincarnation, but nothing has been written yet by a spiritualist. There is one book by a skeptic, a materialist, but nothing has been written by a spiritualist yet to disprove this and to prove at the same time that the afterlife takes place in the ongoing, in the unseen.
Okay. So in other words, there would be no need in the spiritualist ethos for people to be reborn in physical bodies? Absolutely
not.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us a bit about spiritualism, just briefly, just as a background to your own position on reincarnation?
Well, spiritualism actually has a birth date. The birth date for modern spiritualism and the great age of spiritualism would be March 31st, 1848. And at this time, beings from the unseen world, spirits of the dead, began appearing before mortals. And it was a very vibrant movement in the United States. It started here, and it spread to Europe. However, it did not quickly spread to France. And that's where, 8 years later, in the year 1856, the modern theory of reincarnation was born, kind of jockeying into position there with all this new interest in spiritualism, but it was called Spiritism, slightly different, very similar but slightly different, and so that we can account for the birth of modern spiritualism and reincarnation in the same era.
Interesting. Now, you get into in your book, you make a distinction between I suppose it could be called reincarnation and body snatching. I thought that was very interesting. I've heard of it before, but you make a point to make the distinction. Could you explain a bit about how that would work if reincarnation were true, or if body snatching were true?
The only way a pure spiritualist could understand reincarnation or explain it away, rather, would be to show that people in the spirit world, people who are over there on the other side, are capable of returning to the earth plane, but not by being reborn, but rather by taking over the mind or the spirit of a mortal person who's in a vulnerable position. This we could call body snatching. It's just a way of expressing my hypothesis.
Now, I remember you cite the example in the book of a this is the upcoming book, folks, too. It's not published yet. I had the privilege of being able to look at it, of a Japanese soldier who allegedly was killed in World War II and spent his time, I believe, was it throwing rocks as a spirit, quote unquote, throwing rocks at passing carts or something. And then the story went that he followed someone home, and a birth was going on in the family, and he simply moved into the body of the new child. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And obviously, I mean, I think probably neither you nor I would accept that kind of thing. Certainly, it's interesting. You also point out that rock throwing is a paranormal phenomenon that is well known in many cases.
Oh, yeah.
I run into it myself.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, your book... I'm sorry. Your
sorry,
book
no, you go ahead. I didn't have much to say.
Oh, no, that's okay. Your book seems to say the abnormal is often paranormal. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, this is very much at the core of what I'm trying to write about and to teach, because I'm a completely committed spiritualist myself. And I've been dealing in the last couple of years a great deal with I guess you would say psychiatric material. I've been looking a lot at multiple personality disorder and deviant behavior. And instead of all of this fitting into the facile labels of psychiatry, I see all of this as being explainable in terms of spirit possession. That these vulnerable individuals who I talked about a minute ago are particularly open to earthbound spirits and can take on their agenda without even knowing it. And so I feel that the dead end in psychiatry, the sterility of psychiatry, is due to the fact that the psyche, the human psyche, has not been explored and understood.
Okay. Now, there is a question that I had, and it's a little difficult for me to interview, and this is the first interview we've done, but I don't want to overshadow the guest, but you know, you've read at least one of my books, and you know that I take a different view, and I also worked in psychiatric hospitals and studied patients with, you know, multiple personality disorder and things of this kind. What do you think of my idea that the multiverse is behind all this, and that, see, I'm very skeptical about the whole notion, not the whole notion of spirit, but about our terminology for it. And I do point out in some of my writings that our language just is not quite up to actually talking about God or spirit or whatever, and that we sometimes get tied up in terms. Perhaps not, but my position being that within these multiverse worlds, that explains where people are and where, you know, our awareness simply shifts to some place where we're already living parallel lives. And when we get into reincarnation, and I mentioned this last week, I have questioned on a number of occasions people who do these so-called regressions to past lives. And I wondered why they sometimes come up with people who say they're living in the future, or that they're living lives that are in worlds that are very different from what we are so-called past. Because when you have seem to have had some technical difficulties there. Susan, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's
One
all
of those
right.
gremlins we talked about. Folks, you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on Achieve Radio, and we're talking this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are, with Dr. Susan B. Martinez, author of the forthcoming book, The Reincarnation Myth. Okay, let's try to get back to where we were. Let's move ahead a little bit. Can you elaborate on now, you don't believe in reincarnation in any sense at all, or just the classical
No, not at
sense?
all. I believe it's a complete hoax.
Okay. Now, can you explain a bit? You mentioned the fascinating term, the ethics of reincarnation. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Oh, yeah, because I see how this has caught on, how this has become an easy philosophy to adopt, because it gives us so many chances to get it right. In my view, and in the view of pure spiritualism, we only have this life to get it right, and then when we proceed on to our non-physical bodies, we continue to progress. But as far as life on Earth, it's a one-shot deal. Now, what am I answering here? I got lost already.
Okay, you're answering about the ethics of reincarnation.
Oh, yes, the ethics. And so we have karma, and we have I read so many books on reincarnation in order to write my own, and I found that so many authors will tell you that, for example, the slavery. Okay, that's a good example. And I have found authors who say that African persons were brought into slavery because of their bad karma from the past. And to me, this is horrendous. These are the evils that exist in the social system and cannot be explained away by an improvable philosophy like reincarnation.
Okay, what is karma exactly?
Well, you'd be better off asking a reincarnationist, but if I had to answer it, I would say that it's cause and effect. It's experiencing the results of your actions ultimately, which is sound philosophy. But in saying that this passes from one lifetime to the next here on Earth, this is pure speculation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. People have reincarnation, or what seem to be reincarnation memories, and I already asked Ben if he'd minded if I said this on the air here, but
go for it.
We were really wondering when he was born. First of all, now you're a parent as well as I am. Anybody who's listening who's a parent has probably had the experience of picking up your newborn child for the first time and looking into their eyes. And I have been amazed. We have Ben and Jonathan and my two boys, and this happened with both of them. You look into their eyes, and there was such a knowing look in return. It was really beautiful, but disconcerting. And from practically the day that Ben could talk, he was explaining who he was and all these. He was a soldier here, and this had happened, and that had happened. He's 1 and 2 years old. How do you explain that sort of thing?
Well, an infant can be overshadowed just as readily as an adult person. The spirit world is with us. We have guardian angels, and we also have not so delectable entities around us. All of us. Every one of us, and it starts at birth. Perhaps it starts even before birth. There is a soul there. If you saw some sense of recognition there, it's because this soul has come into life to be your child. It doesn't indicate anything about a putative past experience.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned here that reincarnation can be harmful and dangerous. Can you explain that?
Well, certainly, because when you have people passing from this life to the next one, to the eternal life, not believing in the eternal life, not believing in soul growth that takes place beyond the earth, not believing in the many mansions beyond and the plateaus. Okay, the primary belief back. Now, in spirit terms, as spiritualists understand it, the entity that attempts to come back is merely attaching itself to a mortal person who doesn't need that.
Okay.
The person, the entity who wants to come back, in most situations, has some kind of unfinished business, has a grudge, has something it wants to accomplish in a mundane way. None of this is spiritual activity. This is all earthbound stuff. So you get people, and there are many testimonies of this kind. You get spirit people who come back and try to get into the aura of a young child and end up obsessing that child, taking over. And the child is not aware of it because this is on the unseen, in the unseen, because we live in a materialist culture. None of this is understood, and they end up calling it MPD, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorders. These things, when you look at them, when you study them, when you break them down, you can see that these disturbances are coming from elsewhere. Many of the patients...
So psychiatric illnesses, you believe, are caused essentially by the intrusion of spirits?
Yes, and including schizophrenia. They hear voices. We call them hallucinations.
Okay, well... Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm in California, and we can interject here. Let me just remind you of our call-in number, by the way. It's 888-235-7374. Toll-free in the U.S. and Canada if you have a question for Dr. Martinez. But in the meantime, we have a question here from Tom in California, and he says, reincarnation theory has one big advantage in that it makes tragedy, such as the death of an infant or a kitten, easier to accept for us. If life is a one-shot, why do infants die, and what good does that serve?
We all need comfort with the tragedies that beset us. But we should also be realistic and not pick up on theories that make them go away on a baseless philosophy. It is nothing but tragedy when an infant dies, and it's a great difficulty in the spirit world to work with such a young spirit. But we're not picking and choosing philosophies according to how they comfort us, but hopefully according to their truth. The child who dies young continues to grow in spirit. There is some comfort there.
Okay. This, as one who has a degree in philosophy, this is unbelievably the spirit world and the physical world and some kind of veil in between. And you know me, I think I don't.
I'm back. You're there.
Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written. Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God. New River Press is proud to sponsor today's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. We offer the best in unusual New Age books, along with 3 great books by your host, Paul Eno. New River Press offers the new blockbuster on animal communication, Hear All Creatures, The Journey of an Animal Communicator by Karen Anderson, and experience 41 Signs of Hope, the inspiring book by Dave Kane. And don't miss Shadows on My Shift, real-life stories of a psychic EMT by psychic medium Sherry Lee Devereaux, Achieve radio talk show host of Opening Your Intuitive Eyes. Available from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore.
Achieveradio.com. What talk radio should be, all the time.
Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I apologize for the technical problems we're having this evening. There are some, we're broadcasting from New England here, and there are some thunderstorms in the area, and that may have something to do with it. But we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Susan Martinez, author of the upcoming book, The Reincarnation Myth. Are you there with us, Susan?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Thank you for bearing with us.
I'm used to it, Paul.
Yeah, okay, indeed. Okay, we have another question from Patricia in New Jersey. It says, my brother-in-law was reincarnated and is still in my house, in my son's. Is still with us, and can he tell us, we're having trouble with these instant messages as well. But again, someone apparently who does believe in reincarnation. I don't really believe in it either, not in the classical sense of the term, because time simply doesn't exist that way, at least as far as physics is concerned. And but we were talking about ways that reincarnation could be dangerous, and you mentioned a number of things about that. And I had begun to ask you about what do you think of my own view of this, which is that the reincarnation memories and things that are attributed to reincarnation as evidence are really just functions of sort of the life in the multiverse. Now, I know that's very different from the 19th century point of view that some people have about spirit worlds and all this stuff. But I'm wondering if you would allow other explanations for reincarnation, such as mine, or parallel lives rather than successive lives, or whether you think the whole thing is just baloney.
Yeah, baloney.
Okay.
But I would take your multiverse and translate it into the ever ongoing eternal universe. It's the same thing to me. I don't believe in parallel lives, but I believe that when we go forth into our non-physical bodies after death, that we continue as personalities and we grow. And those who don't grow, who remain in the intermediate world of the darkening area, just above the earth, have the tendency to come back. And those are the identities, those are the individuals who bring memories, who bring veridical reports and all of this stuff that you're mentioning.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it.
There was a very interesting study done, I believe it was in the 80s, and I wish I could remember the name of the person who did it. I should have looked it up before we talked. But it was a researcher who suspected that many reincarnation memories might actually be ancestral memory, which is a kind of a slippery concept in itself. But he looked at ancestry, and he looked at twins. And I don't know if you've heard of this before, but he followed back the genealogy of twins, and he found that they had the same or similar reincarnation memories, or so-called reincarnation memories, right? And for example, there was a particular set of twins in New Jersey who were descended from the Swedish royal family from the 12th century or something, and they had similar memories of being a princess and doing this, that, and the other thing.
Well, there you can have the ancestral influence in the family group, in the spirit world. Mm-hmm. Each and every one of these explanations has a counterpart in the spiritualist side. The family group is something that was studied by Dr. Titus, what was his name, back in the early 20th century, that the influence continues. They want to see the continuation of the family line, even though they're already in the spirit world, and they place that influence on their living descendants. But this is all in the nature of spiritual influence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked on a number of cases, and of course, most cases deal with what you might call the spirit world. I mean, I don't look at it that way, but there was one in particular that I'm thinking of that occurred in Rhode Island, and I went in, and this was in 1998, and the particular person involved, in my opinion, it was what I refer to as a parasite, negative entity that was feeding upon a particular woman who was very vulnerable, and had convinced her that he was a lover of hers from a former life. And we actually had somebody in the room when this occurred. She would wake up at night with the feeling of hands around her neck, and there would actually be the marks of hands around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I made it clear that I don't believe this is who they said it was, and I think it's a bunch of baloney, that it was some lover from a former life, the whole nature of the thing changed, and it kind of revealed itself as a parasite, and we dealt with it accordingly, fortunately, with some success. Now, the whole idea of the spirit world as such, we got some interesting photographs about that, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. The spirit world, as opposed to another material world in the multiverse, I just have problems with that. Can you tell me, what is it like in the spirit world? Because there was a psychic involved who believed as I suppose, I don't know if she's a spiritualist, but she would ask, what's it like over there? I'd like to know. She started calling it Frank, and why it would be Frank, I don't know. And it just didn't seem to hold water to me. What is it like in the spirit world, and how do you know there really is one?
Well, you gain knowledge on this subject as soon as you are activated to do so, and then you accumulate knowledge. This knowledge is available. It's not something we have to wait for until we get over there. It is here on Earth. It is available, and it is also recommended that we learn it. I would like to say that I like your word parasite very much, because it encapsulates the idea I'm trying to project here. What is it like in the spirit world? It's staged, and the plane that's closest to the Earth is where the parasites are, and those are the earthbound entities that any spirit release worker knows about. They're doing this more in England than here. I would like to see it done more here, and I'm very inspired by what you're doing. Right above the, it's called from the information I get, it's called Hada, this dark region of earthbound spirits, and they're evil equivalent of the Greek Hades. It's a direct cognate. Once you get above that, if the spirits above can uplift you, next is the intermediate world, and that's also a place of individuality. What I would like to project here is that in the higher reaches of the spirit world, as you move up and up and up, you become part of organic associations. You almost lose your personal identity. The higher you get to etheria or nirvana. All of these terms are known from some of the Eastern religions. So the spirit world is staged. It's hierarchical. It's only chaotic in the lowest ranges. There are schools, there are hospitals, there are nurseries, there are physicians, teachers, workshops, everything that we do here, but in the non-material way for growth and progress.
Well, let me ask you this. What about somebody who's a child molester, who abuses their spouse, or this fellow in Tokyo who just, hit the crowd of people, I believe it was yesterday, and started shooting? I mean, what's their fate? I mean, it can't be warm and fuzzy. What happens to them in the spirit world?
This person is controlled by a spirit who was either himself a killer in life, or was hanged, or executed, or experienced sudden violent death. They go into chaos. It takes years, sometimes 100 years, before higher spirits can reach them and bring them to a higher plateau and a place of learning and a place of undoing the trauma. You will find that trauma is behind all of these things. And this individual who you refer to in Japan was certainly traumatized himself. And at the time of trauma, when we experience it, when we're young and helpless, our own spirit dashes away. It runs away, and filling that vacuum are the hovering spirits, the earthbound spirits of which I've spoken, and they have the ability to take over.
Okay.
My next book, Paul, is called Psy Crime, and I've just read every serial killer book there is, and they all show the same patterns of spiritual overshadowing by negative entities.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly I have theories about parasites and their influence on people's lives. I've seen it all the time. Ben and I both do.
Yes.
And you wonder about their influence in the halls of government, things of this kind. But that's a subject for another day.
Yes, it
is.
And
I will give you the last word. And however you'd like to sum up what we've talked about, I'd love to hear it.
I'm not.
And first, I'd also please tell people where they can get the Psychic Life of Abraham Lincoln, fascinating title, is available, I believe. And if you could tell folks where they can get your books, that would be great.
Yes, the Psychic Life of Abraham Lincoln shows our 16th president was a spiritualist and believed in many of the things I've said here today. The book is available at Amazon. It's put out by New Page Books. It shouldn't be hard to get. It might be in the local bookstore.
Yeah, I've seen it in Borders. Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's excellent. Well, Dr. Martinez, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We don't agree, but that's how you learn, And I'm always learning, even after 38 years of paranormal research, and Ben's just starting out. Mm-hmm. And we thank you for your wonderful insights, and we will be in touch, because Dr. Martinez is I will let the audience in on this, is assisting us somewhat in a very, very nasty case that's really afflicting someone of some prominence in New York City. I can't tell you who it is, but it is a case I hope to be dealing with more on the air, and I hope to have the person as a guest if we can figure out how to disguise the voice and that sort of thing. But I thank you for your help, and I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, folks. Well, there you have two different views of reincarnation. It is a great mystery, I suppose, in many ways. And I have one view, and Dr. Martinez has another. And I know Ben, I guess, was pointing out that some of our guests are not going to necessarily agree with my point of view on things, but they will always be treated with respect, and they'll always be listened to with an open mind. Okay. Now, we are going to get into some of the emails and things that we always receive here, and these are people who have requested some help with their paranormal difficulties. And just to remind you, you are listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on Achieve Radio. And we do invite you to call in. Some people have sent some instant messages, and the number to call in, again, is 888-235-7374 if you have a question for me, me or for Ben. Now, we have a note here from Jennifer in Illinois, okay? And it's, bear with me, it's a little bit involved. Hi, Paul. My husband and I have had numerous unexplained paranormal experiences in our home over the last 18 years. We chalk them up as curious oddities and move on with our lives, even though some have been borderline bizarre. Apportation of human teeth, etc. Apportation means movement by invisible means. So apparently, I don't know if they're dentures or what here, but teeth have been moving around. However, I am super intrigued by the latest manifestation in our home. My husband, who frequently blows out light bulbs, street lights, and stopwatches. Remember the case we talked about last week where the light bulbs were exploding in this poor person's house? Apparently this is happening in Illinois as well as in North Carolina, right? Blows out light bulbs, street lights, and stopwatches. This is her husband, walked past a carbon monoxide smoke alarm detector, noticed the flashing lights, and then set off the piercing audio alarm. I was in the other room and thought this was a recently installed detector that he was setting off as he walked past. But when he finally explained to me that the commotion came from the detector lying on top of our microwave, I was a bit freaked. I had removed the battery a month ago and put the detector on top of the microwave as a reminder to replace the battery. The battery was not dead or weak. It was completely removed. Is this possible? Well, lights and noises occur on a device with absolutely no power supply. He has also, this is her husband, I guess, has seen cats that we do not own and other auditory comments from a male voice. What, in your opinion, is the matter? I was present at the time of the alarm sounding on several occasions. Okay. This is very interesting. Now, my whole experience with the ghosts, and I think Ben can certainly back this up from his experience as well, is that they are pretty much, what'd you say, Ben, probably electrical, huh?
Yeah, I'm guessing. I just need more information, to, understand what they're talking about. If I was actually there and witnessed the event, I would be able to, understand what's going on and maybe get a better, visual, better, idea of what's going on with these people.
Sure, exactly. It is hard to judge from a distance, but so we sort of fall back on stuff we've seen before in similar cases and wonder if perhaps that's not the same answer. But certainly, in all cases, ghosts and all phenomena of this kind seem to be electrical. And why is that? Because the whole universe is electrical. We're electrical. Our brains, our muscles all fire on electrical impulses. And certainly we've seen electrical appliances feature very prominently in many of these cases. The lady mentions an electrical device that's going off even with no power. It's on near the microwave, the light bulb, street lights. It's all electrical stuff. And ghosts are pretty much electrical. And we can talk about some cases sometime where it really is pretty dramatic about how electrical it actually gets. And I have seen things like this before, not often, but when devices that are not connected or are not plugged in have had effects take place because of the electrical nature of the fields that are generated by these entities. Now, I'll give you an example of something that's not paranormal, but it's pretty strange. And this goes to show how conductive electricity can actually be. I was a reporter many years ago in Rhode Island, and they were building high-tension wires. And I've noticed that about 80% of the cases, the worst cases that I've ever had, take place within 200 to 300 feet of high-tension wires. And we talked about last week how parasites in particular will suck power out of the electrical system, strange as it may sound. And I asked people, what has their electrical bill been lately? But I went over to the place where the high-tension wires were running through, and I stood underneath it with my camera, and I had someone else stand underneath it with a fluorescent bulb, a long fluorescent light bulb, and the bulb lit up. And we were on the ground, and the high-tension wires were 100 feet in the air. So needless to say, so I printed that story with the photograph, and the whole town went crazy, of course. But the idea is that, stuff doesn't have to be carried in wires. Electrical currents, which are surrounded by electrical fields, don't have to be necessarily in wires or in devices. They can be affect devices that are around and can make things turn on that are not connected, because that bulb was connected to nothing except the electrical field under these wires. So yes, this is possible. It does indicate that you have perhaps a serious problem, either because you are in an area that is where there are unhealthy electrical fields being generated, or there may be a paranormal source. I would ask a couple of questions here of Jennifer. Do you live near high-tension wires? Have you had your electrical system checked lately? And I would take some sort of steps to see what sort of fields are present in your house, because they can get to a certain point and they can create problems. They can also create paranormal problems. I'll give you an example. One of the benefits of being a ghost hunter, right, Ben, is that you do not expect to be haunted, your own house.
Nope.
But I came out of the bedroom one night, this is back in 2000, and I felt the electrical tingle that I always feel when we are involved in cases, when entities are present. And I said, wait a minute, this is my house here. Also, the bed was shaking one night. That's another common phenomenon in some of these cases. So I took my own advice. Before assuming there was anything paranormal, I took a little Gauss meter. It's an electromagnetic field measurement device that engineers use. And I chuckled because people often advertise them as ghost detectors, which of course is nonsense. But it led me right to the aquarium in Ben's older brother's room. And the thing hadn't been cleaned in some time. I won't go into any graphic detail about that, but it had a pump on it that was putting out 2,000 milligauss, which is high enough to cause a health hazard. That's a measure of these electrical fields, magnetic fields. And it was high enough to cause a health hazard. We got rid of that pump. All phenomena ceased immediately. Never happened again. And I believe that there can be problems in the electrical system that can invite what we would call paranormal phenomena to sometimes occur. So I think that you need to check as I advised the people last week, you need to check your electrical system and kind of get back to me on what may be happening here. I'm the sort of person who cannot wear watches, generally. My wife gave me one for our 25th anniversary that had a special backing on it, and that lasted for a while. But maybe I'm kind of like your husband that way. Maybe he just has a problem and draws in this kind of energy. But whether you have other paranormal problems that may be indicated by the sightings of the cats, the sightings of and other things that may be occurring, such as the hearing of voices of a male voice. This can indicate that you have multiple worlds blending and sharing the same space with you. Of course, here we go back to my multiverse theories. Now, Ben and I ran into a case kind of like that in Leicester, Massachusetts, just last winter. And it was kind of interesting because we got some interesting shots in Ben, because you described what you saw in the bedroom of that house, which was having similar problems to what is described in this email.
All right, here's how it went. While my dad was in the other part of the house just talking to people, I was sitting on the floor, meditating, trying to get a feel of where the energy was coming from. So I was like, whoa, it's coming from that side of the room where that chair is, over there where that lamp thing is, over there. And I saw this orange blob, out of, the peripheral vision. I was like, oh, geez. So I told my dad, he put a little recorder thing on, the chair. When he looked at it later, he heard, a voice on it. Didn't really say anything. It was more just a whisper of something.
Yeah, kind of the classic EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, something we can get into in another show, too. And I'm a little skeptical about that, but it was very interesting because no one was in the room when that was recorded. So the point being that there's all kinds of explanations for these things, but they're all pretty much electrical. All right? Now, we can just advise our friend here to kind of keep an eye on us, keep in touch with us. We'd like to have more information, but do have the electrical system checked out. And as we proceed here, I'd like to remind you, too, you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on Achieve Radio. You can find out more about our work on our shamelessly self-promoting websites, which you can start with pauleno.org, pauleno.org. You can also go to newenglandghosts.com. And there's also footstepsintheattic.com. We're all over the Internet. You can find out all our stuff. And you can also join some webinars that I'll tell you about in a minute. Okay. Here's Patricia again from New Jersey, and I'm really having trouble reading some of this. Before my brother-in-law had died, he saw weeks before, apparently, his death, and my husband saw her on her birthday, November 31st. Okay. This perhaps being some question about people seeing their own deaths. That I think we're going to talk about in another show, because we are kind of running out of time here, okay? But thank you for writing in, Patricia. Anyway, and we do have a few more minutes. So the call-in number again, 888-235-7374. And I'm going to just remind you of some events we have coming up that you might be interested in taking advantage of. And that is webinars, and a webinar is a thing that means saving gas money. You don't have to leave your house. You can get right on your computer and your telephone, and you can participate with a number of interesting authors from New River Press, our sponsor. And the first one here is that's occurring is June 17th with Karen Anderson, who is an animal communicator from the state of Washington. And she's the author of the book, Hear All Creatures, The Journey of an Animal Communicator. And it's on Tuesday, June 17th. It's a teleconference. You don't even need your computer, just your phone. From 6 to 8 Pacific Time, 9 to 11 Eastern Time, and the 8 to 10 Central. And if you go to the Paulino.org site, there is a link on the left for the webinars, and that will take you to these. And most of the other sites also have links to these webinars. On the 19th of June, on the Thursday, 19th of June, we will have a webinar with Ben and me, interestingly enough, entitled Behind the Paranormal. And that will occur from 9 to 11 Eastern, 6 to 8 Pacific. And you can get to the site the same way. Simply go to the webinar link on Paulino.org, and it will take you to the various authors who are signing, who are doing these events. This will be a webinar. You'll be able to look right on the screen and see our presentation. We also have other sides, learning to use your psychic, or as I call it, multiverse power. That's with me, Thursday, June 26th, another webinar, 9 to 11 Eastern and 6 to 8 Pacific. Once again, go ahead to the links on Paulino.org for the webinars, and you'll be able to see those. Now, we have a question. This came in from Tom in California, once again. And Tom is saying fluorescent tubes will spontaneously light in many places, such as near any radio transmitter or close to HV power lines. And, of course, that's what we had happen in that Rhode Island situation when I upset the whole town. And fluorescent tubes, indeed, which I believe are run on some sort of gas inside them, that is the lights from the electrical power that goes through them. Certainly, Tom is pointing out something here that can happen. So, yes, again, it is from our case where we had the alarm going off with no reason, seemingly, that you can have these things happen without them being connected to a direct source of electricity. Thank you, Tom. Now, I wanted to mention as well that we have Spirit Connections with Donna and Dudley Vole. And Donna and Dudley are also going to be offering some webinars in our system here as well. Keep an eye out for those. They are right here on Achieve Radio, and their show is Spirit Connections, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on Achieve Radio here. And also our friend Sherry Devereaux with her show Opening Your Intuitive Eyes, Tuesdays at 7 Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern, all on Achieve Radio. Now, I'm going to look at one more case. We do have a little bit of time here as well. This one is another one having to do with paranormal difficulty. And we may have to continue next week with this, but I'll just introduce it now. The question is from Carol in New Jersey, what is going on in my house? Well, here we go. I live in a 100-year-old house. A few years ago, my sister-in-law said she felt something try to choke her in our guest room as she was resting. I thought she was nuts. 1 year ago, I saw a smoky shadow. It kept its shape, but had no definite form inside my room that passed in front of the window. After it passed the window, it turned into a brilliant white spark, flew around the room, and then disappeared. Okay, well, I think we'll take that up again next week since we seem to be kind of running out of time here. But I would say let's keep an eye on that situation, Carol. Why don't you send me an update on that and just let me know what's happening, and then as well we'll try and give you some sort of answers perhaps in our next show next week. Now, next week we have, in honor of Father's Day, Dave Kane, author of 41 Signs of Hope, a very, very intriguing and beautiful book, and anyone who has lost a loved one should not miss this show. Dave is the father of the youngest victim of the station nightclub fire in Rhode Island that occurred and killed 100 people in 2003, and we'd love to have you with us, and again, that'll be next Sunday at 7 Eastern and 4 Pacific time, and we hope to see you then, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You listen to ARS, the Achieve Radio System, achieveradio.com. Hey, what's a .com in it?